Hello and welcome to our first podcast. This is edgeofplay.com, bringing you podcast number 1. So you've got me, Jack Norbury, and I'm joined by
James Stokes, Edge of Play coach,
and Stuart Montague, Edge of Play coach.
Sort of. So let's start with Stuart, because Edge of Play, people that go on our site and so on may not know Stuart. So could you say who you are and how you know us?
I know you guys through coached with you for years. Met Jack at university. Was part of the founding group who started Govern, the football team that we now assistant manage. And so known each other for nearly 2 decades now, and coached
decades
now, and coached alongside each other. And met James shortly after that when he joined Govern, and joined us, and we've all been coaching together for that amount of time.
Yeah, assistant to the manager. That's important things to mention there. And James, obviously they know me and you, but maybe just to remind people how we know each other and why we're doing Edge of Play in a nutshell.
Yeah, very similar to Stu, that we've played and coached together for years, and we are the co-founders of Edge of Play. So you see our faces quite a lot on the website, and now we're trying a podcast as a different platform to get through to people.
We're thinking that each week we'll talk about something that's topical, something that's out there. It could be something from the weekend games and the professional level, something from our weekend games, or just something that's in the public consciousness at the time. So we're going to try and chat about things today on that note. We're going to look at sin bins, the idea of sin bins in football, which apparently is going to be rolled out across many leagues, including the league that our club Govern play in. And another thing I wanted to talk about today was more of a universal topic really that's often discussed, and it's about the percentage of the game that is mental to physical, the ratio, which is the most important, which is the thing that helps you get ahead. So I thought we'd start with that one today.
I think it's an interesting one because it's open, so you can always there's no right answer I wouldn't have thought for it, and one leads to the other. I would have thought you can't perform any of the technical abilities that you want to try and impose onto the game without the physical aspect being there behind it. But then also, to be driven enough to be a physical specimen, you need the mental side as well, don't you? If you look at some of the people who are, the fittest players who play for all the high pressing teams now, they are physical, but they have to have that mentality where they want to be, they want to excel physically, and they want to be fitter than everyone else. So they tie into each other quite well, don't they?
We do. I think you need to have both. Certainly, I think to get ahead at the top level of the game, you are going to need to have strengths in physical and strengths in the mental area. We need to be clear as well what is our definition of mental and physical, because some are kind of obvious, like you could say physical is speed and strength and core stability and all those things. The thing is, you look at someone and say, yeah, he's fast or he can keep going all day. But you could also think of things like height as well, something that person's not done anything to get that, but they're tall, and that could help them. That's a physicality they've got. And I remember looking back at David Beckham, his body structure, they often said it was almost the perfect shape for a footballer. He wasn't too tall, wasn't too short. He was 6 foot, excellent body fat ratio. He won all the bleep tests. So he had that physicality, which he worked at, but genetically he was a good specimen, wasn't he? So you can look at that as physical. What do we call mental? Are we going to say for our discussion that we include the emotional side of that? I would argue we'd need to, wouldn't we? So your emotional intelligence and the way you respond emotionally to things, as well as your mental strength, which could be decision making, problem solving, resilience.
I think the percentage, especially one that's going to relate to our coaches for Edge of Play, that percentage, or the corner that you're looking at, if we're going to use the FA model, because they're there for a reason, is going to change depending on the age range that you're coaching. It's going to change depending on the individual that you're coaching. I mean, if you use the David Beckham example that you just used, David Beckham wasn't always 6 foot. But at 8 years old, he might have been smaller, taller, average.
He was probably smaller.
Might well. I meant, sorry, comparatively to the other players around him. So obviously you've got to. It's very much got to be looked at on an individual basis, I think.
So the age thing's interesting then to you. You're saying maybe the ratio changes as we get older.
I think so. I mean, you're going to have a very standard way of looking at it, aren't you? That a lot of coaches at a younger level will want to work on the mental side of it. So building good decision makers and problem solvers, those kind of things you were chatting about, because the physicality of players is going to change as they grow older. But what Stu was saying with the two go very much hand in hand is, can you only work on the mental and not work on the physical? And my example there is, if you've got a young lad and you're not looking at the physical side of it, and physical for me can also include stuff like diet, when we're looking at it. If you have a young kid, 7 to 10 years old, even younger maybe, and you're not looking at the physical side, is that going to impact the mental side? So if you have a bunch of kids and we've got some that are overweight, or some that are not eating properly, or some that are not sleeping properly, does that impact on your decision making, your problem solving? Because if you're not physically fit, even at a young age, what are you going to be thinking of? As soon as you go out there and play, you're going to be thinking, I'm tired, or you're going to be thinking, I'm not as fit as the rest of the kids, and that's going to be your sole focus. Your focus isn't going to be on making the right decisions.
Yeah, like tactics and stuff.
Like tactics.
You could say with that, couldn't you? I totally agree with the professional game. You've got, so say you're not particularly mentally strong,
yeah,
and let's say a person that's not got a great game intelligence, but you've got a team of nutritionists, a physiotherapist, sports scientists guiding you to everything.
Yeah.
Your manager's tactically telling you everything. It's robotic almost. Here's the information. You might be able to get away to an extent with your lack of mental strength, because you're a specimen physically, and you can, you may be really quick. And so you can imagine, someone with lack of mental strength may be able to get away with it to a certain level, because of the massive support network. Yeah, but your 10-year-old who might not have support network, how does he change their mental strength?
One of my thoughts that I was having then, when I know James is talking there about almost if you've got problems with it, or where you consider the issues that you might have of lifting them up. I was thinking back to a session that we saw a few years back. If you remember, Jack, I think you were there as well. It was put on by went to see that session by a Real Madrid coach.
Oh yeah, at Oldham.
And I just remember, obviously for like elite kids, there was physically there was a kid there who must have been 1.5 foot shorter than everybody else, but was picking up every drill. He was telling everyone else what the purpose of the drills was, and you could just see, even though physically he was so far behind everyone else, he stood out a mile because of his mental agility, and because of how his game intelligence even at that age. And you could see, if you were going to pick one kid out of that group and think he's got talent, it just shows you how that game intelligence can put you well ahead of people who've got physical talents, even if you're not, even if you're behind. I imagine a lot of clubs are looking for that now as well.
So do you think, on that note, then that'll be on the pro scouts and so on, and also as coaches, to be patient enough with that kid who physically can't handle it, but he's got it up here? How patient are coaches with a player like that? Because we know in England a problem for a long time was the biggest players got picked, biggest, strongest. And that intelligent kid could have been sat on the bench and eventually leave the game, and that happened a lot. And I know with United coaching, I know one of the focuses was they had to be big and fast for a spell. They didn't bring in small kids, and then we were saying, but Paul Scholes would never have made it. And then just as that kind of thought was around, Barcelona were in their pomp, and it was that moment where, small players can be brilliant, like Xavis and Iniestas.
Well, so, you look at the two. If you look at City and Liverpool now, who are both putting up crazy numbers of points this year, and they are, even the small players in those teams are physically aggressive. They're winning back the ball. There's more recoveries. You look at the likes of Bernardo Silva, who you would probably have thought, looking at him a few years ago, you think, he's a bit of a flair player, he's a bit of a fancy player. But I watched both the Liverpool City games, and he ran further than anyone else. He was winning the ball back. And you don't necessarily need to be a huge unit anymore to be aggressive and to get turnovers in the right areas. Do
you think the way the game's changed is helping those players? Because obviously you look back at footage from even 10 years ago, and it's a more physical game, and it was more lenient in the refereeing of the games. So you can imagine the more physical players back then were probably a little bit more dominant because they could get away with it. Do you think the way the game's changed to pick up certainly a lot more fouls, and the way that players can be in terms of giving away little petty fouls is helping the players that are not less physical, because they're all very physical at that level, but maybe, as Jack pointed out, the things that you cannot affect, your height and the body shape and stuff like that, the stuff that you're born with, I think it's helping those players.
You know what the pro game probably is, isn't it? It's helping players. So yeah, if you like you're mentioning Bernardo Silva, you could say David Silva as well, couldn't you? Liverpool haven't really got an out-and-out target man of the old days, and yet you have three incredibly skillful players. Would you be able to do that a while back in the 80s? 90s, maybe not. Maybe you'd need more, but do you think the grassroots game's changed though?
I was just about to ask.
Do we allow the technical players
so
to survive?
So if you take grassroots back 10, 15 years and you had trials days, which I'm not a big fan of, but if you had trials days, you probably looked at the big lads, the fast lads, those lads coming through that could impose themselves. Now, even the referees now, they do so many training days and referees courses, and it's filtering down to the very beginner levels of refereeing. Is it coming through now to let the more technically and mentally strong players thrive in grassroots football?
That's the thing as well. We're kind of talking about the different types of physicality, but small or big, it's still a physicality, isn't it? So with someone small with good stamina, speed, endurance, and get around the pitch like your Bernardo Silvas, that's still probably, either way you argue it, it's physical. And then what is it about that then compared to the mental side of a player like Bernardo Silva? Let's stay on someone like him. What is it about his mental game that makes him what he is? Because you mentioned before, Monty, with pressing, that idea is a mentality, isn't it? So that is when he's going after the ball, that's a mentality. That's part of his mental strength, his mental understanding.
I think with a lot of it, it's hard. It's hard sometimes to scale down what we're talking about with these absolutely elite teams, because even you trying to scale it down to grassroots level is difficult, because trying to scale it down to mid table teams is difficult because they just haven't. It's okay saying, you want a player who's got technical ability, who can also press, who can also have stamina, who can also have X, Y, Z, and that's why you're looking at these really, really elite players now, where those top 3 or 4 teams, they're picking the players that have got absolutely every one of them, so they can pick small players. They can pick up a Bernardo Silva or a Naby Keita who can take a man on, win the ball back, physical, strong. But I think sometimes as you come down, you have to pick one or the other, don't you? A little bit,
right, yeah.
Almost like if you're Tony Pulis, he's had quite a lot of success there because he likes stacking his teams with big units. He doesn't pick fullbacks that can go up the pitch and play attacking football. He picks big lads. He doesn't want them getting too far up the pitch. He doesn't want to get beat. And it's still successful in a different way. He just picks to focus on, well, I suppose it's physicality and mentality for him, isn't it? He likes winners, competitors
players,
who are big, strong competitors. And occasionally you might lose to a more technical team, but there's more than one way to skin a cat, I suppose.
So we can say then that if we take this a little bit away from the pro game in towards grassroots, is that maybe the pro game, the margins are so small, we're saying pretty much everyone at the very top, the elite of the game, we're expecting excellent physicality and we're expecting really good mental strength and intelligence. You'd think, as we go down the levels, are we thinking then that maybe it becomes a bit of a choice between you're either mentally strong or physically strong?
Yeah.
What do we think?
I think probably it's probably more technical, isn't it? I would imagine that is probably the offset isn't usually physical and mental. I imagine you'll find quite a lot of teams, League One, League Two, Conference, who are quite physical and quite mentally strong.
Yeah.
The trade-off then probably more often becomes, do you want those guys, or how much do you trade that off for technical ability, who have might not be as physically strong or might not be as fit, but they've got a bit of flair. They can they've got a bit of quality.
If you get to that level, if you get to conference level and go on to grassroots after that, how much do you think you can affect those two sides of it? So if you pick up a player at a semi-professional level, how much do you think you can affect the physical side of his or her game, and how much do you think you can affect the mental side of his or her game?
I was thinking about that. The mental side of it, you might be able to make huge advancements for the player, but it's not as easy to quantify it, is it? You can say, well, we've improved you've lost this much body fat and you've improved your speed by this much in 6 weeks. You can quantify the physical a lot easier, can't you? Or you're getting through games now. So the hard thing with that question is, how do you quantify that mental improvement? Yeah, I definitely feel it takes longer mental improvements. They're more gradual. It doesn't you don't have a steep curve, I don't feel. But
so is that a case why when we have the coaches that are doing the younger side of it, they're focused on that mental side, because that's the time to make your game intelligent players, your quick decision makers, your good problem solvers, those words that we're looking at.
Definitely, that's when all your pathways are getting made, isn't it? As a child, you're building up all those pathways in your head. Once they're ingrained, then don't they? Whereas you can still do those pathways as you get older, learn a new language, but a kid can pick up a new language quicker than an adult
Absolutely.
can't they? So it's got to be the same with if we don't flood them at a grassroots level, if us as coaches are not flooding the younger kids with decision making and chances to strengthen mentally, we'd let them down, wouldn't we?
Yeah. You're asking them to look at these tiny little bits to make players, but the time, especially when these are volunteer coaches and they've got day jobs and families, and the time you're asking to put in to make that player is a lot. When you've got 10, 12 players in a squad, you're talking about personal development plans, looking at each of those corners. It's a big ask to make those players, isn't it?
Yeah. I'm laughing because someone's just started drilling next door, which is really helpful for a podcast. But no, it's for grassroots. It's the practicality. It's blooming difficult, isn't it? How do you develop players? And like we said, physical is probably easy to see. Everyone will see a physical improvement quicker than they'll see the mental improvement.
Yeah.
And so we've got to convince a player, oh no, this is working. You're getting better at it. You're improving your resilience, the way you deal with problems. It's really difficult. And I think, I'm spinning that slightly as well, do we think that it takes mental strength to improve your physicality? So I put down Ronaldo as an example. We compare Messi and Ronaldo. Ronaldo looks like he's had to work for every last bit of what he has. And you think that wasn't just him physically being good at doing something, he's mentally incredibly strong to keep pushing and pushing and pushing, isn't he, and reaching new levels.
Yeah.
So it's almost that the two then almost become entwined with him, for me. His physical and his mental incredibly strong.
There's a great quote about those two. Messi's an artist's dream and Ronaldo's an engineer's dream.
Yeah.
I love that because it is true, and he has had to work very hard at it, and that comes from the mental side. You'll know I know, you boys might not, but I'm terrible at going to the gym, and that's the mental side of it. I can have little spells where I'm like, yes, I hit the gym every morning, I'm up early and I'm going there, and then I'll fade, and that's not having that ability to push myself through sometimes.
Motivation is difficult for a lot of people. That's why we have so many problems with obesity, people not being as active. Yeah, motivation. What motivates you to do stuff?
Grassroots coaches, you get 1 or 2 hours with them a week in training. What can affect them outside of it mentally, in terms of family and school and social and all those elements, you don't get to see that. So it's really hard to have a kind of consistent plan with them because there's so many.
That's probably the key skill, I'd imagine. If you think about it, the key skill of being a grassroots coach is time allocation of which are the problems that you can spend most time on, where are the areas that you're going to get most benefit from if you've got problems, almost triaging those problems, and which ones do I allocate my resources to, because you've got such limited resources. And it's not like if you're in the pro game, you can just go and pick up a player from somewhere else that he's decent, he's got what you want. You haven't got that opportunity a lot of the time. The grassroots game, this is the raw material that you're working with.
Yeah.
And so it's how can I get the best out of it with the time I've got? That's probably the key skill, isn't it?
Our level of game and below our level of game, actually, in terms of age range, is going to be less tactical than the top level. And we see all the time that some players are physically brilliant, but they seem to have no game intelligence. So it might be rapid, a winger, but we can outthink them or we can outsmart them in that way. And then sometimes we play against lads that are clearly overweight, but you can say straight away, he's played a level. Yeah. You can just tell by that thing. So I think that's what we end up doing. We end up trying to work out what someone's weakness is, and we hopefully presume normally that it's either physical or mental at our level, that we can count on that. Whereas the higher you're going must be where's the weakness? Where's the weakness in that player? So we don't want to put a number on this. I think it'd be foolish, but to kind of bring this little discussion to a kind of conclusion of sorts, would you say mental or physical, one is more precedent?
I'd always slide to the mental. I think obviously if you've got you need a certain level of physical capacity before you can compete. It's the idea that you could have 11 players that didn't have enough physical capacity, but they're all smart. Well, they're still going to lose games because they're not fit enough or whatever. But I think all of the things being equal, I'd probably, for my team, I'd like to slide the mental side of it up a little bit, and I think that because it gives you more options. I think it gives you more tactical flexibility.
I would probably lean more to the mental, emotional side, But taking it as read though that you've got a base level of genetics as well, isn't it? I think you'd have to say now to get to the professional game, the amount they run in a match, if you've not got a base level of physical ability, you won't be able to show your intelligence. Jan Molby wouldn't probably make it now, would he?
He'd be less likely to. I think he probably
in a high press.
He might be a bit of an oddity, but I think later stage Jan Molby probably wouldn't. Earlier stage Jan Molby he wasn't too bad actually.
We'll have been moulded as well though from our experience as players and coaches. So none of us. Jack will be the fastest out of the three of us, so none of us were ever blessed.
Let's just say with this then, that is a ridiculous race. It'd be one of those underwhelming races you've ever seen.
It would. But that probably moulded you as a coach because you've had years of not being physically fast. Therefore, you've worked on the mental side of your game. Therefore, when you get the players, you want to work on their mental side of the game.
But do you know what? What I'd say about that maybe a little bit is that's true. And obviously, like I've generally played in defence. I've been a fullback a lot of time. I've played centre midfield. And I'm not the biggest guy in the world, but there's nothing more pleasing than beating someone bigger than you in the air. So I learned very early on that even though they'd be physically bigger than me, I need to get up early, I need to get up over the top of them, I need to nudge them before they get up in the air.
Yeah.
And so that's again a little bit of game intelligence means that you can win that battle even though you've not been blessed with the physical size.
That's your mentality as well, isn't it?
Yeah, of course it is.
As well as your game intelligence, your mentality is I'm going to beat you kind of thing. Because I was thinking it's a bit like to say that some of the best managers and coaches were not the best players, and maybe as we come down the levels, we're all in coaching. None of us are going to say we're the best technical players. We know that. Maybe that's why I went to coaching. You study your own game. You do the best you can. I definitely feel we've all got the very best out of what we've been provided with. And yeah, we're forced. And you see players that are physically and technically leaps and bounds ahead of us, but we believe our understanding of the game just helps us stay in there, doesn't it?
Yeah.
So is it similar with that then? That your mentally strong players are mentally strong for a reason. Maybe they had to be to keep up. So yeah, I think the debate then goes on to other people. So we'll welcome your thoughts on this. Physical, mental, is it a completely mixed bag at different levels? Is one more important than the other? We'll welcome your opinions on that. We're going to talk about the idea of sin bins in football. We've been told with the club we're with and the league we are in that from next season there'll be a sin bin brought into place for dissent. James, can you tell us any more about that? Because you were our club secretary as well.
So yeah, we went to a league meeting and we were lucky enough to have Premier League referee Chris Kavanagh there, just chatting about a few changes to the game. And one of the questions that was posed to him was this rule change. And the idea is that, like an orange card, like something that says, what you're doing isn't right. I'm going to give you 15 minutes to call off on the side.
Is it 15 minutes? Yeah. Is that the proposal? Gosh,
I think
right.
so. I think it's 15 minutes.
10 to 15 anyway, somewhere like that. Something that would normally be a yellow card?
Yeah.
We've not been told a great deal, have we?
No.
To be honest, a lot of it still seems to be getting decided. It's a sin bin thing, like you'll see in rugby. I can see why they want to do something about dissent. The question I want us to have a quick chat about is this the best way to deal with dissent?
I think when it comes to a lot of implementation of like new rules, or when they fiddle around a little bit with rules, the thing that frustrates me is the rules that they have in place currently are adequate for sorting out dissent. All you need is strong referees who are going to be backed up, and also for the grassroots level, you also need the top level of the game to care about dissent, and they clearly don't. The amount of times you can see a decision being given and there's all sorts of swearing in the referee's face or chasing the referee and causing murder, and the referee just takes it. And it just feels like if you had strong referee and that was backed up at the top level, that would go away. The incentives would soon shift, and it's like almost like simulation. If you incentivise people to keep pushing this on the edges, they'll keep pushing it because they're professionals who are trying to take every margin. And it's only when you look at last week, when you've got players are applauding the referee, it's only because then it's so visible that the referee has to book them for it.
Yeah.
Let me just throw something at you, because Chris was saying this in the league meeting, that actually what you see on TV isn't a fair reflection of what the referee sees in the game. So he said, a lot of the time when it focuses on a player, the immediate one that springs to mind is Wayne Rooney whenever I think of dissent on the pitch. A lot of the time when it focuses on them, and you can make your best attempt to lip read what they're saying, the referee's already focusing on something else. You don't see that because you can only see what's on television. The referee's got his back to him, the referee's looking at the next passage of play.
Well, it's lost in the noise of the crowd.
He's talking to his assistants, it's lost in the noise of the crowd. So they're doing it quite sneakily. The rest do the best job they can, don't they? Your point is completely valid. If everyone was strong, then there wouldn't be any dissent. There's a lot of young referees coming through. You see it in junior games, you'll see it at adult football. There's a lot of 18, 19-year-old referees coming through that want to get to the top of the game. Now, if we go back to the last topic and the whole mental resilience side of it, they're young referees as well. They won't have built up that mental resilience to some of this. So giving them something like a sin bin is going to help those lads manage the game. It's going to help them calm what is quite a heated moment, I think.
And it might be good for those players as well, thinking about it, who clearly have some kind of anger issue. You know, in the heat of the moment, they go mad. They have to go off. They can get as mad as they want. They're missing football. Yeah. Whilst they're stood on the side, you know, watching the game go on. I can see how that might have an effect, but to me, the only issue is it's not getting to the root of the problem, and it's just kind of another way of managing the problem. So yeah, maybe that person now misses this next week, he doesn't have a go at the ref. Maybe. I'd like to compare it to, and I know there's loads of reasons why this is not simple, to the rugby model. I remember saying this to a referee in one of those meetings a few seasons ago. It works for rugby, why can't we get it right in football? So it's a different game, it's totally different. It just seems mad when you're watching the Six Nations or one of the big rugby games, even in the last minute of a game, a referee will make a decision. Not one person in this extremely physical game says a word to him. Not a word. And every camera's on every player, no one says a word. And I know there's a lot of reasons why that's got to that stage.
That links so nicely to Monica's point now. So I'm a kid watching professional football, and I see players screaming and shouting, and I see managers screaming and shouting. I'm a kid watching professional rugby, and I see them speaking respectfully to an official. I think you're right, it has a massive influence, a huge influence.
And again, it's incentives, because if those rugby players thought they could pressure a referee, and if they thought that dissent was going to get them somewhere, they'd do it, because they're top level athletes and they're looking for every advantage.
Yeah.
There's been a couple of cases recently, weren't there, of rugby players like faking injury and blood packs and a couple of weird ones, but so they will try and get whatever edge they can. The reason that it's not worth it is because they know that it's far more likely it'll cost the team than it'll gain the team something. Whereas even down at our level, I've been guilty of it for years. You push a referee as far as you can possibly push him. You try and be his friend. If that helps, you'll try and apply pressure to him. If that
cynical
helps,
man.
Shout the loudest. Yeah, it's sad, isn't it? But
you do. It's about incentives of what can I get out of this for my team.
As a coach, what are you saying to your player that's come off for 15 minutes?
I'd definitely be looking at the fact that you're letting the team down.
Yeah.
Your team are now playing without you. You definitely got. It probably would empower a coach, wouldn't it, to say, not just you've got a £10 fine, mate. They might go, so what? But now you've just lost 10-15 minutes, and because of that, the team lost the game. You're not playing the next game now as well. So that could empower coaches to control dissent. I can see that.
I could see also, though, that if you've got certain players who maybe bully referees a little bit all the way through the season, that you don't mind every now and again if one of them comes off for 15 minutes, because if you've got 5 penalties and 24 offside decisions out of it, then, at the end of the day, you play on the edge. It's like physical teams you put the foot in. If you constantly making tackles that are just above the yellow card, then when one of your players eventually gets a red card, okay, you might have gone over the top a bit, but it's that thing of over the course of a season, is that helping or hindering you?
You know what, with that as well, one thing our club has had issues with dissent, no doubt about it. Imagine a scenario which has happened recently, a really bad tackle goes in and the referee doesn't take action, and your players to go off injured, and so someone says, "Ref, how can you not have done that?" and the referee deems that as dissent, and it's almost like a double punishment then. And so I think with this, it can't just be, right, let's improve dissent. Why are people giving dissent? Is there any part of that? Part of it might be social, societal, and all that, fine, we need to look at that. Is part of it the referees? Is there any part of it, are we allowed to say that some of these referees, for any number of reasons, are not tackling bad tackles? And that's leading to dissent? Or is it just as simple as, no matter what happens, deal with it, and maybe that's the case.
If you want to make a change, it needs to take time and you need to have an impact. So, for example, the Mike Dean example is always a really good one. They made a change about pushing and pulling shirts in the penalty area and giving away penalties. And Chris was saying that Mike Dean went on a one-man mission and gave, literally, I think he gave 8 penalties or something in 5 games. In 5 games, he said, I'm going to stick to the letter of the law here. Penalty, 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 penalty. He said it looked crazy. He said, but he made his point. Now, whether that's reduced it or not, he made his point. I think if you get these young kids in, or referees at amateur and semi-professional and then professional levels, and say, sin bin, sin bin, sin bin, sin bin, sin bin, it might seem ridiculous to start with. You might have an 11-a-side game which is down to 9 versus 8 at one point because 5 players are off the pitch. But you have to be radical in that change to actually make people change. You have to say, this, you're going to get punished. You're going to continually get punished until you realise that this isn't acceptable behaviour.
And maybe those referees, trying to help them out on this as well, then, once dissent gets over the months, it'll take months, won't it? Once people get it in their heads, right, referees do this now. Yeah. It was 9-a-side last week and we couldn't cope with the space. Then the referees may be less in their ears, they start to make stronger decisions in other areas, don't they?
Yeah.
Because they're not getting non-stop harassment, basically. So I could see that. Sometimes there's an attitude at our level, I find, when I say our, grassroots level, is that we worry too much about the fine that comes with the punishment. I've seen people say, oh, come on, you don't want him paying, I don't want you paying 30 quid fine. You think, well, no, if like you said with my Dean, someone's broken the rule, maybe we need to be a bit firmer to it. And yeah, you got sent off because you did dissent twice.
Well, I've said for years now that it's so strange that at our level, you'll only ever see you only really see yellow cards for dissent and red cards for terrible tackles, whereas in any normal game of football there's 4 or 5 yellow cards for tackles. It's not vicious, it's just someone's gone for the ball, they haven't got it right, or someone's made a bit of a cynical foul. It's not violent, it's just a cynical foul. It's part of the game. It's, bookings are part of the game, really, they're part of the laws. So I mean, if you're looking for discipline, I think really you'd be much better off finding the club after a certain amount of bookings. It's like once you've picked up 25 bookings, then that's the cost of it. Once you've picked up 30, that's the cost of it. And then if you are a club that's really ill-disciplined, then it'll show, really. Yeah. But a referee walking off a pitch after giving 4 yellow cards, that should be normal and run-of-the-mill, really. I'm not sure we should be fining people for just slightly mistiming a tackle if it's a genuine tackle. They've
probably sat down and thought, well, how do we stop these players from doing it? Well, we're going to have to fine them a set amount of money.
Yeah, I presume the FA. I presume the main argument behind this is the losing referees. You're hearing all the time, there's a lack of referees. What's the way to tackle the lack of referees and the referees leaving the game? Dissent. So I can see why they're targeting that idea, that they want less hassle, and you can totally appreciate that, can't you? Do we think then that it should be across the whole level of the game? Should it be from the pro game to the grassroots game? Because it feels like at the moment they're using the grassroots game as a pilot for it.
I think they're doing it right. Pilot it for a season. If it needs improvement, improve it. If it works, push it up.
Yeah, I can see that. Stuart, what do you think?
I can see the thought to it. It's with this and with a few other things, like even with VAR to a certain extent as well. I just feel like sometimes it's pushing it down the road rather than actually dealing with the problem and saying, right, okay, the problem is dissent, so you've got a yellow card in your pocket, use the yellow card. That's the solution to it, especially up at the top level. I think it's different down at the R level where you might need different solutions, a bit more flexibility. But up at the top level especially, I just feel like a lot of the time there's like, oh, we've come up with a new initiative. We don't need a new initiative. Just empower the referees to use the laws properly and to be forceful with them.
So we'd like to again know what grassroots coaches out there, people listening, what are your thoughts on this idea of a sin bin for dissent? Is this going to tackle the main problems in football, or is it just kind of putting a plaster over the problem and we're not really getting to the root of it and what's causing the dissent in the first place? Thank you very much for listening. I hope you found it useful. 3 old friends talking to each other about football. It can't go wrong, can you? So goodbye from James.
Bye.
There you go. Stuart.
Yeah, see you guys.
Yeah, and we'll look forward to speaking to you again, or speaking at you again next time.